Welcome, students, for the chapter number 11, Project Risk Management. We were discussing about the project risk management processes. In our previous lectures, we have done the planning risk management, which is the first process for risk management. Second is identifying risks. So after identifying risks, the next step is to understand which risks are most important by performing different analysis, right? So we can perform two analysis, qualitative risk analysis and quantitative risk analysis. So qualitative risk analysis is to tell us that how we determine if a risk is big or small and how we figure out how likely the risk is going to occur or materialize. So, qualitative risk analysis is actually very important step which help us to identify or understand the most important risks on which we need to focus on. So before I start discussion on the how to perform the qualitative risk analysis, we need to understand what is quantitative and qualitative. Now look at this slide, this donut, right? So if we want to explain it, how we can explain it? We can analyze this in two ways, qualitative or quantitative. Like for example, I say the donut is coated with sugar. If I see it, the color is 10 and when I have a bite, so I say it tastes delicious. So these are the all this description is actually the qualitative. So qualitative is what? It's a subjective analysis, right? On the other hand, the quantitative is objective and it is based on verified and specific data. For example, if we want to know the diameter of this donut, so it's 10 centimeters, it is certain. It is 30 millimeters of strawberry jelly. The price per donut is $2.45 and the profit per donut is $1.05. So qualitative risk analysis is subjective, as I tell you, and it is based on the person's perception or judgment. Like for example, it's someone it say it tastes delicious, the someone else says that it's very delicious, it's awesome, or maybe someone say it's just like it's something which is just okay. So it's qualitative risk analysis, it's based on the person's own perceptions or the judgment, but quantitative risk analysis is objective and it provides more details, the contingency reserves, right? And it takes, it's based on some specific data, like as we see here in the slides, it's something which is, the diameter, the size, the price, it is same. It does not depends on the personal perception of anyone. Whatever the situation is, the price will be same, the profit will be same, the size will be same, isn't it? So you understand the qualitative and the quantitative analysis. Now let's discuss in this chapter, in this video, about how to perform the qualitative risk analysis. So qualitative risk analysis is actually a process of identifying, analyzing, and evaluating the risks for project. It uses the subjective judgment, as I explained you just now, to determine the probability of a risk occurring and its impact on project. So in short, if I say that the qualitative risk assessment is actually based on just identifying the probability and the impact, right? So it's all about finding out the goal of the qualitative risk analysis is to understand the potential risks so that the project team can prioritize and focus on managing the most significant threats and the opportunities. So, what is probability? Probability is how likely some event or risk event will happen, and impact, like how bad it will be on what is the how much it is good or bad consequence on it on our project in context of schedule, in context of budget or scope, the three constraints, right? So it assesses the likelihood and impact of identified risks to determine their magnitude and the priority. So the goal of qualitative risk analysis is to come up with a short list of risks that need to be prioritized above others. And the outcome of this process is a list of risks with their corresponding probabilities and the impact, so that we should pay attention to the most important risks, and the project team should not waste the resources and the time on those risks, or on those events which have very minimum or maybe almost no impact on our project. So what techniques we should use? So the risk quantification tools and techniques for performing qualitative risk analysis are: number one is the probability impact matrix. Then we have a top 10 risk item tracking and the expert judgment. So we need to, for all this, we need to establish a criteria for assessing and evaluating the risk qualitatively before we go for any impact. So here we first start with the discussion of probability impact metrics to calculate the risk factors. So its probability risk matrix is actually a very important topic within the qualitative risk analysis. It's a very important process. So this is basically a table where all the risks are plotted out according to the corresponding values assigned by the team, and these values are nothing but the values of the probability and the impact. So a probability impact matrix lists the relative probability of a risk occurring on one side of a matrix or axis on a chart, and the relative impact of the risk occurring on the other. It lists the risk and then label each one as high, medium, or low in terms of its probability of occurrence and its impact if it did occur. So it can also calculate the risk factors in numbers that represents the overall risk of specific events based on their probability of occurring and the consequences to the project if they do occur. So for example, I give you one example at this point, like a meteorologist might predict a high probability or likelihood of severe rain showers on a certain day. So if that day happens to be your wedding day and you are planning a large outdoor ceremony, the consequences or the impact of these severe showers might also be high. So you need to pay attention. Maybe you need to, change the value, or if it is possible, you need to change the day of your wedding. Let's understand this concept of probability and impact by visualizing the risks. So this picture shows a goat. When we glance into the journey of this goat one, we can focus on the hurdle or the risk, which is in the form of this pothole filled with the water. So if we talk about the probability of the goat getting into the pothole is low, since it's very small and the goat may easily jump over it. But if it is, it happens, if the impact will be zero or low, because it's not deep and it's just filled with the water. So the goat will not be, impacted too much or maybe injured too much. But on the other hand, if we see the goat to journey, we can focus on the hurdle or the risk, which is in the form of a big, wide hole, which is again filled with the water. And in this situation, in this scenario, the probability of the goat getting into this hole is high since it's very wide. But if it happens, the impact will be low since it's not very much deep and it's again filled with the water. Now look at the journey of the third goat. If we see the hurdle in this situation, it's here we can see the hurdle is low, right? The probability of the goat getting into this hurdle is low because it is not very much wide. But if it happens, the impact will be high. So impact will be high, and because the hole, deep in the hole, we see the sharp edge material is placed, which can cause the serious injury to the goat. Now look at the fourth one. In the fourth case, when we glance into the journey of this goat, we can focus on the hurdle or the risk, which is in the form of a big, wide hole with many sharp objects. So the probability of the goat getting into this hurdle is high since it's wide, and if it happens, the impact will also be very high because deep in the hole we can see there are sharp edge material is placed, which can cause the serious injury to the goat. So what we can see, what we understand from all this discussion, that all the risks can be categorized into the four divisions, right? Like in the first situation, we see the probability of this event is low and the impact is also low. In the second case, our probability of the risk is high, but the impact is low. In the third case, the probability is low, but the impact is high. In the last case, the probability and impact both are high. So by qualitative performing the risk analysis, we are actually finding out to what risks have high probability of occurrence and they also have the high impact on our project. So we must have some strong plan, some mitigation plan to overcome or cope up with these risks. So how we can do this for this the probability and the impact metrics. So this slide is actually shows the division of on our basis of our discussion. All the risks can be categorized into four divisions. So we need to find out the identifying the risk we identified in the second process of our project management risk analysis. Which the identified risks are placed in which category, right? So our focus will be on the high probability, high impact risks. So the point is how we can create the probability impact metrics. So probability impact metrics, we can divide all this part into three steps. So first step, like for each risk, the team will assign a value for both probability as well as impact. Second, once step one is done, the data can be arranged in a tabular format, and then we get the product of relative probability with impact, which gives us the final weight of the risk. In the last step, using the weight of the risk, you can check where the risk lies in your probability and impact matrix. So it should be self-explanatory to take care of the risks, which have high probability and also the high impact. So let's start with the first step. Like for each risk, the team should assign a value for both probability as well as impact. So here you can see in this slide, like as I tell you, we need to assess each identified risk qualitatively using the established criteria. So this risk assessment criteria include the probability, both probability and the impact. So as we discussed in the beginning, that qualitative analysis involves the subjectively evaluating, right? So similarly, if we want to talk about the probability scale, so it should be for this we need to use the predefined scale, for example low, medium, high, to categorize the qualitative assessment of probability and impact. Now this slide shows us the table, the risk probability for the risk probability scale, and we see here that the probability is defined, as I tell you, that this table should be defined in your risk management plan as per the project context, the type of the project, and the choice of the team. It's not a standard scale, right? We can, in this table, you can see we have 5 scales. Like number 1 is 0.1, and we scale on the scale, our scale, we say the priority is very low, like it's a very minute chance of occurring, means just a 10%, right? So it's like we can say it's unlikely to happen, this risk unlikely to happen. Second is we say maybe it's unlikely to occur, and the weight we say it's 0.3. So it is means it is possible to happen, this risk. If the risk in this category, it means there is a possibility to happen. Third is the moderate, for which we as a team we assign 0.5, like it may occur, means it's likely to happen. Second is high, the weightage is 0.7, and it means that it's almost sure to happen, this risk, the risk which comes in this category, very likely to occur. The last is very high and the weightage is 0.9. It means that it's almost certain, it's sure to happen, this risk. So similarly, we can make the impact assessment. Now, first we find out the likelihood, the probability. What is the probability of happening certain risk? Now, second is the impact. What is the impact if these risks will happen? What is the impact on of these risks on our project in terms of scope, cost, and schedule? So here you can also see if it is very low, so maybe the scope is barely noticeable and change, and the cost is also with a very insignificant cost increases, or schedule can also be, can be absorbed. But if it is low category, then maybe the minor areas are affected in terms of scope, or maybe our cost is less than 10% will be increased, and it has some less than 5% change to our schedule. So similarly, if it is moderate means it may cause some impact, like important areas may be affected for scope, and 10 to 20% cost may be increased, or maybe the 5 to 10% change to schedule we can have, it may happen. Then we have a high. High means it can be. Now the impact is high. If certain risk happens, the impact may be unacceptable change in scope. Maybe we have a 20 to 40% cost increase. Now you see as the scale is increased, the impact is also increased. Or maybe it can cause 10 to 20% changes in our schedule. And if it is something huge, serious impact, so we can put it in a category of high. So maybe the scope change in project objectives, a big change. Maybe the cost is greater than 40%, or maybe our schedule is impacted more than 20% of actual schedule time. So this is actually the first step for each risk. The project team with the relevant stakeholders will assign a value for both probability as well as impact. Now, after this step number one, now we are having a step number two, that once step one is done, the data can be arranged in a tabular format, and then we get the product of relative probability and its impact to get the final weight of the risk. So here we are making it like in this slide, you can see here, for example, some risks are noted down like training gap, probability, let's say the occurrence of likelihood of happening this risk is 0.1, means the 10% chance is this. But if it happens, it is a 70%, 0.7 impact on our project, maybe the scope, or maybe the time, or maybe the budget. So our second step is to get the product. So when we multiply zero point 0.1 into 0.7, we'll get 0.07. Similarly, for all the risks, we want to assign the relative probability and impact factor, we calculate, and then we get the product of this. Uh, okay, after this, now the third step is to using these. Now, here this product of probability and impact give us the final weight of certain risk, like the training gap. If there is a training gap in our risk happens, so this is the way, this is how it will impact our 0.07 percent impact on our project. Similarly, another one, missing the coding milestone due to scope change. So the impact is 0.25. So this is how we can, calculate the weight of the risk. Now, um, after this, we use the weight of these risks, and we need to create a probability impact matrix and find out where the risk lies in that matrix, right? So it should be like this, right? You have to put the risk like this. This is a tabular form. You can see that on x-axis we have the probability, and on the y-axis we have the impact in terms of schedule, cost, and the scope. So here it is self-explanatory to take care of those risks with the higher values of both probability and the impact, like these are the darker area in our uh, you know background colors. So from here I will I will take you to this probability impact matrix you can create in the Excel sheet. So let me show you that how you can create in the Excel sheet. So I'll take you to the another screen. Okay. So this is a sample risk register, right? We have different, this just a sample we discussed in our previous lecture in video, that what things we need to take care about when we are making our risk register. So here you can see we have certain risks. We have 10 risks identified, and we have some descriptions for that, and some expected dates are there. And the team and the relevant stakeholders find out the probability and the impact. One thing is that, like, probability impact metrics it depends on the team's understanding and uh, you know uh, their experience to decide the probability and the impact weightage. This is the same matrix I show you in the slides, but we can have the scale like this also, like just low, moderate, or high, just scale of 3. So similarly, here in this example, after finding out the probability and the impact, we need to calculate the overall score for the risk weight. So here I will use, we'll use the formula like right? So it's just a simple multiplication. We'll drag it for all. So this is how we can have the risk for, we have the overall risk weight for the identified risks. So we can make it more, visually understandable. So I'm going to the conditional formatting, and we assign some values for for the low impacted risks. We say they are between 0 to 3. If it is, then they are very low impact. They have maybe very nominal impact or almost no impact on our project. So you see, all these are there. And the risks which are maybe medium or moderate, we can give the values from 4 to 7, and the color scheme should be yellow. Now the last, with high probability and the high impact, they will be between 8 to, let's say, 10, and the color we choose red. Okay, so you see, now you can easily find out the risk number 2 has the high probability and the risk number 10 has high probability, and we need to pay more attention to these two risks. We can make it more visually understandable to, if we want that the most highly high weighted risk should display at the top. So for this, I will go to the data. I will sort it, right? Sort from largest to smallest, right? So you can see we need to pay attention. We should have a solid mitigation plan for the risk number 2 and the risk number 10, right? Okay, now come to the probability impact matrix, like how we can make this probability impact matrix. So for this, you can have you will, in the Excel, we can make it like this. For example, we use the dollar sign, let's say, to lock the cells. Okay, so just drag it and move it towards right. So this is our probability matrix. We can apply the same color scheme over here also. So we have 3, we are going for 3 color sides. For the lowest value, the color should be green. Okay, this is yellow is fine. But for the highest value, we choose the color red. right? So easily you can find out that the which risks, the risk which from here you can find out that which risks will fall in which these values you will be able to interpret which risks need a pretty solid mitigation plan, and while which ones can be monitored as the project progresses, right? So this matrix helps us to prioritize the risks based on the combination of their likelihood and the impact, right? Okay, one more thing in the our risk registers, like you can see here, you can translate these as with the risk names, right? You can say the risk 4 has low priority and the low, impact, but risk 2 and 10 has a high impact and the high probability. So this is how you can calculate, you can prepare for the probability impact matrix. Now we'll go back to our slides to complete the topic. So this is what I already talked about. The same screen, which I told you that we can use the probability. This is from your book, like we can use a probability and impact matrix just to visually represent the relationship between the likelihood and the impact of each risk. So this matrix helps in easily identifying and prioritizing the risks. So if I talk about in context of our opening case, like for example, the Cliff branch and some of his project managers in the opening case could each identify 3 negative and positive potential risks for a particular project. So they could then label the probability of occurrence and impact of each risk as being high, medium, or low. So, for example, one project manager might list a severe market down turn as a negative risk that is low in probability but high in impact. So you can put it according to that. So you can calculate. So the team should focus on risks that fall in the high sections of probability, like this high section of the probability and high section, also the high section of the impact, like risk 1 and the risk 4. This is another way this diagram is shows the chart showing high, medium, and low risk technology. This is the figure from your book. It provides an example of how risk factors were used to graph the probability of failure and consequence of failure in a research study on some proposed technology for designing more reliable aircraft. So you can see the figure classifies the potential technologies like these dots, right? The dots on the chart. So as high, medium, or low risk areas based on the probability of failure and consequence of failure. So this is all about our probability impact matrix. The second technique for qualitative analysis is top 10 risk item tracking. So top 10 risk item tracking is a method that takes periodic reviews of the project and creates the top 10 risks. This establishes how the risks are rated and how many times the risk appears throughout the process. So it's actually a qualitative risk analysis tool that helps to identify the risks and maintain an awareness of risks throughout the life of a project. It involves establishing a periodic review of the top 10 project risk items, includes the current ranking, previous ranking, number of times the risk appears on the list over a period of time, and a summary of progress made in resolving the risk item. After this top 10 risk item tracking, the other risks should, for that you can put it in a watch list. So watch list is a list of risks that are low priority but are still identified as potential risks. So they can be used for qualitative analysis, can also identify the risks that should be evaluated quantitatively. Before we go for the quantitative analysis, we should have to find out the qualitative, we have to perform the qualitative analysis. Now, this is the example of top 10 risk item tracking, and this table provides an example, for the top 10 risk item tracking chart that could be used at a management review meeting for a project. So this example includes only the you can see here in this example, we only include the 5 negative risk events. And like first is inadequate planning, the poor definition, absence of leadership, poor cost estimates, and the poor time estimates. And you can notice that each risk event is ranked based on the current month, right? The monthly ranking. This is the monthly ranking, current month, and the rank last month, like last month in the current month the ranking is number 1. The last month it comes in the at the number 2, and in the previous months, number of months in the top 10, it's in the previous month it ranked as number 4. So it it shows that how many months it has been, certain risk has been in the top 10 list. So the last column you can see is briefly describes the progress for resolving each risk item. You can have the separate chart. This is for the negative risk, but you can have separate charts for both negative and the positive risk, or combine them into one chart. It's depends on your project, on the requirement of your and the idea decided by your team. So, girls, here we are done with the qualitative risk analysis. Performing the qualitative risk analysis process help you prioritize or rank the risk for further analysis and the action. So it's a systematic process to estimate the level of risk for identified and approved risks, which you did in your second process number 2 of identifying risk, and it involves estimating the probability of occurrence and consequence of occurrence and converting the results to a corresponding risks. And when you finish with that, obviously the final step is to update your risk register. You need to record the results of the qualitative analysis in the risk register, include the assessed likelihood, impact, and the priority of each risk. You need to update any relevant information such as risk owner and the response strategies in your risk register. And the most importantly, you need to communicate the results of the qualitative risk analysis to the relevant stakeholders, maybe your customers, maybe the sponsors, whosoever are the important stakeholders in the project. You need to communicate them and make sure that there is a shared understanding of the prioritized risk and their potential impact on the project. So here we are done with our discussion for the qualitative risk analysis. In the next video, we will continue our quantitative risk analysis. So here we are stopping.